So we started looking at and answered at least one of the questions: what are the costs to include? And we want to include any costs that are going to make the asset usable for our business. So that way we can generate sales off of it, and there's going to be costs associated with maintaining it, etc. The next thing to do is, hopefully we generate sales. So what are we going to do with these costs? What are we going to do with this asset? And so we need to start asking these particular questions. What am I using the asset? How long am I going to use it? When I'm done, what am I going to do with it? If I choose to get rid of it, how much will I get? And then ultimately, what's the best economic use model? So let's see if we can go through these 5 questions related to a piece of property. So let's say we ended up buying a piece of machinery to use to manufacture one of our goods, okay? Or maybe we bought a forklift for our warehouse to move things around. It doesn't really matter what the thing is. But what we want to start asking ourselves is the item going to be used for profit production, or is it just going to be used for support production, right? So is the asset use to generate sales, create inventory, support management, and that could be the accounting function, finance function, etc. Ship inventory, whatever it is used for. Now, the reason why we're going to try to answer this question is when we get to management reporting, I want to make sure that whatever the costs are for this piece of equipment, whatever the costs are for this asset, I want to make sure that those costs get allocated within the company, the internal reporting. So that if it's going to a cost center like supporting management, I want to make sure it goes to the cost center. If it's going to a profit center like the sales department or inventory, shipping, anything that's generating sales and supporting sales, then I want it to go to a profit center. So knowing where the assets should be housed is going to help us with our management reporting when we're trying to figure out, does it go to a profit center or cost center, and which one? Now, as far as the financial reporting is concerned, I don't really need to know this because the financial report combines all of the cost centers, combines all the profit centers, combines all the responsibility centers into one set of financial statements. And if you've worked in different businesses, you'll hear, from time to time, oh, you charged my budget. You shouldn't have charged my budget. You should have charged this other budget. Well, they're not talking about the company's budget. They're talking about the center's, the responsibility center's individual budget, because that manager is going to be evaluated on how well they do relative to their responsibility center's budget. So what I'm trying to do a little bit with this particular course, because we want to also talk about management reporting in addition to financial reporting, is try to blend some of these ideas together. So when I'm talking about financial reporting, I also want to talk a little bit about management reporting, and that's the answer to this particular question. So that's going to be the answer for what am I using, for what am I using the asset. And it's trying to allocate whatever costs are associated with this asset to whatever responsibility center it needs to go to. Then from a financial reporting standpoint, and then later a management reporting standpoint, these other questions are much more critical for what we want to talk about today. So the next question is, for how long? For how long, right? That's the next thing. This is also referred to as what I believe when I buy this asset, when I put this asset, when I build the asset, buy the asset, when I put it into service. What's the useful service life? Of an asset, of this particular asset. Useful service life. This, do you really know how long it's going to last? Have you had a car that they say, well, this car should only last 4 years, and 10 years later you're still driving it? We're only concerned from an accounting standpoint on what we believe is the average economic life, not somebody who takes really good care of it, maybe doesn't drive it much, etc. So we want to evaluate useful life. And there's a lot of different ways to measure useful life. It can be based on time. It can be based on miles driven. It could be based on hours operated. It can be based on, well, it can be based on number of copies. If I'm looking at a copier, numbers of output, right? Number of copies or output. So there's a lot of different metrics that you can use to figure out what is this useful life. And whatever you come up with, it's an estimate. You really don't know how long this thing's going to last. But at the beginning, we have to come up with some answer to this question, some reasonable answer. And this is all based on the data that you have. The data that you have within the organization, the data that you have being in that industry, using these assets in the past. That data is going to be helpful in determining what is the useful service life, what is this particular estimate. So we're going to come back to this variable because we use this variable to try to figure out, given the costs that I accumulated, how am I going to allocate those costs over this service life? So if it's based on time, then how am I going to allocate that over time?